Welcome to the 15th chapter of the book of 2 Samuel. We continue with the payback by God against King David's sinning by taking the wife of Uriah and then having Uriah put to death. And all the curses that God put against David are now taking place, mainly through his son Absalom, who we saw in the last chapter was a man who was very handsome, more so than most people, and it describes him some ways of having a very long hair and just nobody like him. And so we continue now and we find out what happens with Absalom. It says, and it came to pass, I said I would read a few verses in the chapter, so I'll do the first one. Ke ageneto metatavta, ke episen iavto Avsalom, armata ke epis, ke pentikonta andres, paratrakin emprostenavtu. It came to pass after these things that Absalom prepared to himself chariots, horsemen, 50 men to run along in front of him. The epison comes from 4160 to do, poet, P-A-O. And here we have, I use prepared. So he prepared. You wouldn't say that he did. Absalom did to himself chariots. He made, I suppose you could make made, but I use prepared. So he had these chariots and the horses and 50 men to run in front of him as an advance guard. And Absalom rose early and stood at the way of the gate. Odhu, odometer comes from that. And it came to pass, every man which had a case, crisis, we have a crisis comes from that, and came to the king for a judgment, that Absalom called him and said to him, well, from out of what city are you? And he said, well, your bondman is from out of one of the tribes of Israel, more or less so-and-so, here's where I'm from. And so Absalom is asking, making friends with him, and Absalom said to him, well, behold, your words are good and well-tempered, but there is not one hearing you from the king. And Absalom said, well, why shall he not place me for judge in the land? And every man shall come to me, to whomever might be a dispute in a case, and I will do justice for him. So he's putting himself up as a judge. It's getting some power. And it came to pass, when the man approached to do obeisance to him, that he stretched out his hand and took hold of him and kissed him. So he's buttering up these people, becoming very friendly with them, and they like this. He's very personable. And Absalom did according to this thing to all Israel, to the ones coming for a judgment to the king. So whenever they come, he is in between. And Absalom adopted the heart of the men of Israel. So they liked the things that he was doing, and they went after him. Now, David was a warlike man. He had partook in quite a few battles and wars, and needed money for these wars, and taxed the people, and receive money from other nations, tribute and so forth. And we find out later with Solomon that it continued with the government spending all this money, and the people became dissatisfied with the way it was being run. So the beginning of it sort of is here with King David. And it came to pass at the end of 40 years. So now 40 years from the beginning of this chapter, now we get 40 years later. That's quite a few years. So Absalom was maybe who knows, 25 years old at the beginning, so he'd be 65 now, something like that. And it came to pass at the end of 40 years that Absalom said to his father, King David, patera, paternal comes from that, I will go indeed and pay my vows, which I vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your bondman vowed a vow in my living in Geshur. So he's telling the king that he is now wants to leave and go to this back to the place where he was living, and it's up north in the Golan Heights, saying, "If in returning the Lord shall return me to Jerusalem, then I will serve to the Lord." So basically, then he's saying he's going to go, and everything turns out okay. He'll be coming back. And the king said to him, "Proceed in peace." And rising up, he went unto Hebron. And that's actually down south of Jerusalem, not Geshur up north. And Absalom sent spies into all the tribes of Israel, saying, "In your hearing the sound of the trumpet, that you shall say, Absalom reigns in Hebron." So now he is planning on revolting against his father, taking the kingship for himself. And 200 men from out of chosen men from out of Jerusalem went with Absalom. And they went in simplicity. They didn't know, and they did not know not one thing. So he has all these people going with him. And Absalom sent and called Ahithophel, the Gileonite, a counselor to David, from out of his city Gilo. And so this man was a counselor. So he called him during his sacrificing the sacrifices. And there was a strong confederation. And the people went and multiplied with Avessalom. So he's now gaining strength, an army. And one came reporting to David, saying, "Well, the heart of the men of Israel is committed after Absalom." And David said to all his bondmen with him in Jerusalem, "Rise up, and we should flee, for there is not a deliverance for us from the face of Absalom. Hasten to go, and that he should not hasten and overtake us, and thrust evil upon us, and should strike the city by the mouth of the broadsword." And the servants of the king said to the king, "According to all, as much as seems good to our master the king, behold, we are your servants." And the king went forth in all his house on their feet. And the king left 10 women of his concubines to guard the house. And these were his women that he had relations with, and like a harem. And back in these days, the sort of the, what would you call it, the bull moose syndrome of men controlling women for their own sexual pleasures and so forth. And if they had a lot of power, they would have more of these women. And so this was not unusual for powerful men to have many wives, and continues on down. There's still people today that want to have more than one wife. Why? I don't know. But they do, and the Mormon religion sort of has been, I don't know what the word, approving this type of behavior over the years that it's been in existence in the United States. So there are men that want to have more than one wife that are Mormons in the West and Utah and places like that. Now the men, if you see movies of the bull moose or elk, the male will fight against other males to keep his harem, all these female elk or moose, for his pleasure. And for him to lose these to another male would be, I don't exactly know, I'm not a moose, so I don't know how they feel, but they would do everything they can so this would not happen, be a disgrace. And the king went forth out of Jerusalem, all the people by foot, and set up in a house far away. And all his servants passed by his hands. So now they're leaving Jerusalem. Every Cherethite, every Pelethite, and the Gittites, 600 men having come from out of Gath towards Philistia by foot, were passing in front of the king. And the king said to Ittai the Gittite, another friend, "Why should you go even yourself with us? Return and live with the king." And he's calling Absalom the son of king. "For you are an alien yourself, and because you are displaced from out of your place." Gath, I guess. So maybe not a Jew. "Since you came yesterday, then today shall I move you to go with us? And I shall go wherever I shall go. You go and return your brothers with you, and the Lord shall execute with you an act of kindness and truth, to do the right thing." And Ittai answered the king, and he said, "As the Lord lives," so apparently he knew who the Lord was, "and as my master the king lives, that unto the place wherever my master the king might go, and if unto death or if unto life, that there your bondman will be." So Ittai is not leaving. And David said to Ittai, "Go and pass over with me." And Ittai the Gittite went, and all the men with him, and all his servants. And all the land wept with a great voice. And all the people passed through the rushing stream of the Kedron, which is a river that flows from past the valley right next to Jerusalem down to the Dead Sea. And across from the Kedron is the Mount of Olives. And the king passed over the rushing stream Kedron, and all the people came unto the face of the way of the wilderness. Now they're leaving the confines of Jerusalem, greater confines. And behold, also indeed Sadok and all the Levites were with him, lifting the ark of the covenant of God. So this Sadok, I'm not sure if he was a high priest, but took the ark with them to take with them to go with David. And they stationed the ark of God, put it down there. And Abiathar, who was a high priest, that was with David, but later leaves him. He ascended until all the people ceased going from out of the city. And the king said to Zadok, "Return the ark of God unto the city. If I should find favor in the ophthalmes of the Lord, the eyes of the Lord, ophthalmologist, and he returns me, then he shall show it to me and its beauty. If I come back, he brings me, and then I'll see it there where it's supposed to be, more or less. And if he should say thus, I have not a want in you, behold, here I am, let him do to me the pleasing things before him." And the king said to Zadok the priest, "Behold, you return to the city in peace, and Ahimaaz your son, and Elnathan the son of Abiathar, the two sons of yours with you. Behold, I wait for you in the wilderness of the desert until the coming of a word by you to report to me. So go back unto your sons." And Zadok and Abiathar returned the ark of God to Jerusalem, and it stayed there, back in the tabernacle. And David ascended upon, because the temple had not been built yet, and David ascended upon the ascent of the olive groves, the Mount of Olives, ascending and weeping, and his head being covered over like in shame, and he went barefoot. And all the people with him, each man covered his head and ascending and weeping. And it was announced to David, saying, well, Ahithophel is among the ones confederating with Absalom. And that was another friend of his, high official. And David said, O Lord God, efface indeed the counsel of Ahithophel. And David was coming unto Ros, I'm not sure where that is, where he did obeisance there to God. And behold, another Hushai, the chief friend of David, was coming from meeting him, tearing his inner garment, with earth upon his head. And David said to him, well, if you should go through with me, then you will be unto me a load. You're going to be a burden. If you should return into the city, then you shall say to Absalom, I am your servant, O king. Allow me to live. Basically, he wants him to be a spy. So he tells him to say that to Absalom. For I was a servant of your father then and just now, and now I am your bondman. And by saying this, efface to me the counsel of Ahithophel. Basically, whatever Ahithophel suggests, then counteract it, make it so it doesn't. Absalom doesn't listen, because this Ahithophel was a wise warrior. And behold, there are with you Zadok and Abiathar the priests. So they're going to be back in Jerusalem, and it will be every word whichever you should hear from out of the house of the king, that you shall report it to Zadok and to Abiathar the priests. Behold, there are their two sons there are with them, Ahimaaz son of Zadok, and Jonathan, Jonathan, son of Abiathar. And you shall send by their hand to me every word whichever you should hear. And Hushai, the friend of David, entered into the city. So he goes along with this plan to efface the counsel of Ahithophel. Goes back into the city. And Absalom at present entered into Jerusalem. So David's leaving, and Absalom is coming in. So now what happens next? We'll have to find out by joining us in chapter 16, the next video seminar, which I hope you will do. And until then, God bless.